child is compliance. Because if they're not listening to you, they can't stop to learn. You know, if you're the one chasing them the whole time, they are in chasing mode, they're not in learning mode. You know, and they're not figuring it out. So compliance is really the core of the issue here. The core is, will they listen to you when you're in the same room? Will they walk with you when you're in the same room? Will they come to you when you say, come here? Will they come to you within the same room? And a lot of times in therapy, we call it compliance training, is just teaching the kids really basic commands. Come here, sit down, stand up, let's go, and just, you know, walk with me. Those are all compliance issues. And if they're not doing it in your one room in the home, they're not going to be doing it at the park. And you start with a really small place, you teach them to come, and that when they come, they get some kind of reinforcement for it. And then you make the space a little larger. So not only are you 10 feet away from me now you're across the room, now you're in another room and you're able to come whether you see me or don't see me. Now you're in the backyard and you can come from me from anywhere in the backyard. And then now when they're outside in the front of the home and you're inside the home, you know, that you can call them and they'll come in from outside. Yeah. You know, there's like, you have to build towards the park.
Yeah.
And we talked to all of our staff about one of the reasons that we have a team of staff is that the kids start to learn compliance across people. Generalization is really important so that they're not only listening to the one person in their life and no one else. They understand that come here from whoever it is they need to come. And it's spreading it out. So it's working on the compliance, having them understand that if I hear my name, I need to look at the person who's calling or give some indication that I heard them and I know that you want me to come to you. And you just build how, you know, that compliance has to go far. And I used to joke with families. When I was a therapist, I remember just telling a new therapist and a new parent saying, yeah, if I'm working with this kid and they're like, how come he just comes from wherever he's at? And I said, it's almost like that invisible stick, the cane, to drag them back in.
Right.
You know, so a kid can be running, and if I know I have compliance, I can just yell no or stop.
Yes.
And the kid just stops.
Right.
And at least they'll turn around and look at you like, what do you want me to do? And at schools, they used to laugh and say it's like you had that invincible cane where you would just stop them from far away.
Right.
And it's like, come here, and they would come back.
It's that Wonder Woman thing.
Yeah.
She's got the lasso,
yeah,
right?
It's like I got you from somehow, and I don't know, just by hearing your voice. But it was a lot of practice and repetition, and starting in a small environment and slowly building to that bigger environment.
And also, if I could add on to it, that knowing that nothing bad is going to happen when they do listen to you, that's a big component of it. That, you know, it isn't just, for the longest time, there was that whole tiger mom thing about, well, you know, my kids will comply. But what we see is that kind of compliance, the kids grow up and then they don't follow what it was that they were taught. They're just complying for the moment, and the minute that the parents are out of the house, forget it, all bets are off, right?
Yeah.
That's not the kind of compliance that we're looking for, but there's a trust that's built, because I know people are going to write in and say, but if we teach them compliance with everyone, then they're fodder for the bad people, and that's not what this compliance is.
Yes.
It's because alongside this compliance, you're teaching safety rules about, we don't just go walk, we're teaching levels of friendship, so we don't walk up to people we don't know and sit on their laps. We don't talk to strangers unless somebody else has said that it's okay. You know, all of those things. So it's compliance with the people that they trust, and they trust them because nothing bad happens.
Yeah, and that's the whole the reinforcement aspect. They learn initially. People say, "Well, I don't want them to come to everybody."
Right.
But initially, they have to know that if they come, something good's going to happen.
Right.
They receive something good. And a lot of times, if you're a parent, it's just a hug.
Right.
You know, it's just the hug and the touch and just being able to say, you know, give them some love.
Yes.
And so for parents, the kids are a lot of times are so happy to come if they know that they're going to get something good and they know it's you.
Exactly.
And so then when you go to the park, you do have to teach them, walk with me. And you practice walking with you, and you might not start at the park because there's so many enticing things. You start in a place that's relatively boring and they have nothing to run to.
Yes, that you're more exciting,
yeah,
and that you're holding something more exciting than what they would run to. I want to say too that there's a wonderful episode of The A Word where Jack Riley will not walk with his mom outside. He wants to run, and if you think about it, why wouldn't he?
Yeah.
It's so much easier to see it in somebody else's child. We get all emotional and go, my kid won't hold my hand. And I remember what that felt like. But I'm watching Jack Riley, and the parents are so upset about the fact that he won't listen to them. They do a social story for him about what the rules are, and they take him outside, and you see him trying to bite his mother's hand because he does not want to hold her hand. But they work what the behavior intervention plan was, and they show you the whole thing. And then he learns, oh, if I walk and hold hands, I get to be outside longer. I get to do the thing I want longer. And it's all fine after that.
Yeah.
And they kind of condense it into a very small thing, but it's really worth watching, and that's on our A word.
That's great. I mean, if you can watch the whole process, then that's going to give you hope.
At least there's little snippets of it. I mean, obviously they don't have the time to show all, the whole thing, but they show sort of the steps of it, and you see him getting better at it, and you see the frustration of the dad. Because at one point, they have to go back inside because he wasn't following the rules, and he's upset, and dad's upset, and but you see them work through all of that, and it can be a really good thing.
Yeah, and you say that the schoolyard is fenced in and the park is not fenced in. You have to be smart about where you're practicing. You start with, inside the home where it's confined, the backyard where it's confined, the front yard where it's open, but you have some, ability to bring them back in, and you slowly go towards the neighborhood. And I wouldn't go to the open park first, but I would go to the fenced-in one just in case he does decide to bolt and, that he can't get hurt,
Yeah,
just
safety.
Safety is a big issue, and just learning the kids. There's a lot of, stranger awareness that we teach the kids just for safety. You don't go to people you don't know. You don't take things from people. You don't go climb on people that you don't know. And it gets really confusing. I remember my 2-year-old, when she was 2, we had come out of a hospital, and I think I was pregnant. And there was an old woman who fell down in front of me.
Oh.
It was not good. And so I ran over to help pick her up. And I remember my 2-year-old asking me, like, do you know her? Like, she was trying to figure it out. So even a typical 2-year-old, she was like, do you know her? Why did you help her? Like, why did you hold her hand? You told us we're not supposed to,
Right.
Like, and this is just a typical child being able to, there's so many rules. And she was just trying to figure it out herself. And I just think, well, we expect our kids just to know. And you're teaching typical kids along the way, and it's the same kind of rules. You wouldn't let a child just run off to the swings at a park if you didn't know that typical child was going to listen and stop and come back to you.
Absolutely.
And so you're teaching it. It's just that you have to be more intentional in teaching our kids with ASD as opposed to our neurotypical kids, where you are teaching them, but it's not so intentional.
Yeah.
You're just doing it as it goes along, and they learn and they pick it up.
Yeah, they
and
pick
figure
it up. Exactly.
Yeah, they pick it up. And you're not having to say, okay, I have to teach this next, and going by the steps. But there is a way to do all this, and if you really work on that compliance and being able to come and realize that I can listen to you and good things happen, and there's, and as they become more communicative to tell you what they want, you can respond to them about when they can go and what they can do. And, there's a lot of that relationship that's built there where they know that if I go to the park, Mom will let me go up on the swing, will let me go on the slide, will let me do these things, as long as if she calls my name, I come back to her.
Yeah. I remember feeling like it took forever. Like in the process of it, it feels like it takes forever, and it feels like your life is never going to be better. And then all of a sudden one day you notice that your kid is the kid who listens and the other kids aren't. I still crack up if we go to the pool, because we have a pool in our neighborhood that's for our neighborhood. And, I had very good card therapists who taught me how to, tell him, okay, it's in 5 minutes we're getting out, and give the countdown. And over the years, the countdown got less and less. But that I would say, okay, time's up and it's time to get out of the pool. And the rest of the moms then would go, okay, it's time to get out now. And their kids wouldn't get out, and they'd have to get in the pool to get their kid out. And they would go, how did you do that? And I would just simply say, it's a series of steps. It's not rocket science. It's behavior science. And he knows that if he gets out of the pool and listens the first time, he's going to get something. We're going to go home and he's going to get a juice popsicle or something that is going to make it worth his while. Mm-hmm. And that's when all the party lights come on. When he does what I've asked him to do, all the good stuff happens. And that when he doesn't, that stuff doesn't happen. It's not that it's punitive or I'm going to stick him in timeout or in the corner or something, but the juice popsicles don't come out.
Yeah, and our kids learn the idea of missing out really easily.
Yeah.
Because they're so used to the reinforcement, they know that they'll get something for, coming. And it can be anything from the hug to the juice box to, a piece, whatever it is. And, but then they also know that if they don't do it, it can just go away or not be available. And maybe next time when we try this, it'll come out again.
Yeah.
And that, I always, the value of missing out, it changes their behavior. Yeah. They don't want to miss out. And especially if you have siblings, who there's some comparison. Well, the ones that have siblings don't ever want to miss out.
Right, because who would? Who would want to miss out? Okay, we're going to take a break and then we'll be back with more of your questions. Stick with us.
Can you say hello? Say hello.
AJ?
Stop crying.
AJ, let's eat. Can you eat, AJ? Let's eat, son. Have a fry. My understanding of autism was very limited.
He would lick tires on cars, windows, you name it. And so we went to the 13-month checkup, and I remember our pediatrician, he said, well, he probably has autism. There's nothing you can do about it. Come back in a year when he's 3.
Our initial understanding of what the ABA program was basically all we picked up from this clinic in San Antonio.
He didn't pick up any signs the entire 8 months that he was there. I think the difference came when we changed vendors.
We were very impressed with the way that CARD actually gathered data to be able to quantify the progress that he was making. They have a curriculum that they follow that's tailored to each child. They were identifying AJ's strengths and weaknesses.
We were finally starting to see real progress.
Good, AJ. Here's eggs.
The first thing CARD did for us was, I remember the first time AJ said, "Mommy, I want you." And that was the most wonderful thing ever. There's hope.
Yeah,
that's when I knew that there was hope. I never thought that AJ would be able to say that. It was like a gift from God. It was so fantastic.
With CARD, we got him enrolled in a private school.
And he was in a typical classroom. He would go from activity to activity. He could sit when he was supposed to sit. He could be around typical kids. The goal is for CARD to work themselves out of a job. It's for AJ to be in a mainstream classroom with no help, and he's functional and he's learning. We're really grateful to all of the therapists. AJ would not be where he is without them, and we will never be able to repay the part of themselves that they gave to him to make his life better and to make our lives better.
If you're watching Autism Live, chances are you care about the life of someone, or perhaps many people, living with autism. You spend countless hours trying to make a better life for them. It may not have been easy for you to watch the show today. You know, sometimes you could be juggling so many balls in the air, you feel like a circus performer. I remember recently saying to a friend that as the mother of a son with autism, plus all the other challenges in my life, I feel like I'm carrying a tray full of glasses of water, and that if one of them topples over, the whole thing is going to go crashing down. This empowerment moment is all about you. Now, I'm not a doctor or a therapist, but over the last 9 years in my autism journey, I've learned some things that have helped me shift from being a victim to having hope. See, I've been in that place, down on the kitchen floor, on my knees, praying for answers of what happened to my child. I've been in that place, covered with blood and tears, after one of Wyatt's giant tantrums, where I said, "Where has my fairy tale life gone?" I have a feeling you're a member of that kitchen floor club too. It's been a process, But I've come from that place of being a victim to becoming an advocate for my son Wyatt and for many others as the executive director of ACT Today, or Autism Care and Treatment Today. Let's start with reframing the way you think about yourself and your child. I want you to say after me, I'm an activist. That's right. I'm an activist, because just by watching this program, you are taking positive steps to make the world a better place for your child or someone else living with autism. You are a positive force of action in the world. I want you to start thinking of your so-called disability as an opportunity, because it's within our challenges that our greatness is revealed. That's where we find our courage and resiliency. And parenting a child with autism is one of the greatest challenges a parent can face. You have the choice to see this as a journey of self-discovery. Some people take expeditions to climb Mount Everest to see what they're made of. You don't have to travel that far, because parenting a child with autism is an expedition of the soul. Until next time, stay strong and keep the faith.
Parent to parent, having a compliant child is one of the greatest things on earth. But frequently we ask ourselves, why doesn't my child listen? Well, here are some tips to help us to get a listening, happy, compliant child. First, we want to make sure that we make compliance worthwhile. Whenever your child does something that's compliant, make sure that you praise them and heap rewards on them that are meaningful to them, things they really want. One of the things that we have to be mindful of is that if the child isn't compliant, we have to praise more often. Just heap it on. If you say to yourself, there's nothing to praise, they're not doing anything that I want them to do, then ask them to do something that they already want to do. This is a really tricky way of being able to praise them. And then, of course, the last thing that we want to do is catch them doing good things when they least suspect it. And make sure you heap that praise on, because having a compliant child is one of the best things in life. Token economies are a great way to get to good behavior with your child. We have with us Evelyn Kung. She's the clinical director of the Center for Autism and Related Disorders, been working in the field of autism for how many decades?
2.5.
2.5 decades, so 25 years. I mean, a wealth of experience here, and you guys have been writing in questions faster than I can keep up with them, and that's a really good thing. All right, so let's start with, we had Carolyn had just written in on Facebook and said, is homeschooling the right move for my grandson? And she also gave us information that he has ADHD as well.
Okay.
So
without knowing details about the child.
Well, and can I say too, I didn't give you the disclaimer first, that Evelyn is going to be here and answer your questions, but there is no expert in any field that can give you individual specific advice.
Exactly.
So that's not what this is about, but this is about giving you some information so that you can go and ask more questions and get further in depth. But obviously you have not had an opportunity to meet with this individual.
Because it's very different for every child, depending on what their needs are. But homeschooling can be a valid option, especially if you're in a classroom or school situation where your child's needs aren't really being met. And you've really gave it the go with the administrators and with everybody there. And your child is getting lost, and their own self-confidence is going down. And it's, so it can be a valid option. We actually have quite a few kids that are being homeschooled at CARD right now.
Yes.
And we actually work with them to figure out what is academic and what is aligned with CARD curriculum, so that when it is aligned with CARD curriculum, like a lot of the executive functioning skills, especially if they have ADHD, they have a lot of EF skill deficits. And we actually try to combine the treatment programs so that they can work together and reinforce one another.
Okay.
And so, but homeschool programs are really dependent on who's implementing them. I've seen really good homeschool programs where the person running it, whether it's the parent or somebody outside of the family, is running it and making sure the child's meeting milestones and making development and making progress and meeting IEP goals. then it's working and it works great. But I've also seen kids who don't have somebody who is really checking on those things, and they actually start falling further behind.
Yeah.
Because nobody is making sure that progress is actually occurring.
Yeah.
And you don't have somebody really looking from the outside and saying, hey, you know, are they meeting all the criteria that they should be meeting in terms of their learning goals? And I've seen those kids actually really suffer. Okay, and typical and atypical.
Yes.
I've seen both happen now.
So there's a lot of different things to take into consideration. And I like to think of it as a plus and minus column. I remember thinking that my son was going to need to be homeschooled because I didn't see when he was 3 because we had an early intervention before we started with CARD that didn't work. Can I just say, and that was really an exercise in frustration because he would be in a small group setting and it was like torture for him. If one of the other kids stimmed, he was gone for the rest of the time period.
Wow.
And he would scream and then he would try to bite somebody and kick somebody. It was bad. It was bad news bears. It was hard on me. It was hard on my husband. It was hard on, eventually the other parents asked that my kid be removed.
I know, it's so terrible.
It was hard, really, really hard. And I remember thinking at 3, well, then that means he's going to need to be homeschooled. In the interim, we had CARD that did a 40-hour program. But so then he was ready to go to school, but I didn't know it. I thought he needed to be homeschooled. And what was said to me was for my individual kid, he needed the social component really desperately. So he was not a good candidate for homeschooling. He needed to get that other. But I was lucky too that we had a fight with the school, but we got the school to do what they needed to do. I wasn't walking in where everything was the way it needed to be, but the school, we fought, and they eventually saw it the right way, our way, right? But some schools, you could fight forever and they're never going to do it.
Yeah, and it really is circumstantial. Like, we actually have somebody that I think would be a great guest for your show one day.
Yeah.
Her son is actually a freshman this year at the University of Arizona, and he's doing amazing, and he was homeschooled the whole way through.
There you go.
And he's amazing, and he just does crazy awesome things in robotics, I think.
Oh, wonderful.
And I mean, he's just amazing. And that mom, since he was little, has just like kept him on and has reached out whenever she needed help or wasn't sure. And she was just really organized, and she had a great homeschool community that he was a part of. So he had the social elements that were put in 3 days a week, or whatever it was through the years. And it changed. For some people, homeschooling might be good for a year or two just to catch them up. We have one of our kids in Boston right now. The school just was not listening, and he was falling farther and farther behind, and he had so much potential. So we actually have started homeschooling this year, and I saw him after a year of homeschooling, and it was amazing how much progress he had made in a year. And then there's other kids where we've homeschooled and it's worked, and at a certain point we're like, you know what, he needs to be back in the classroom again. And you go back and you re-engage with the school and say, we've done 2 or 3 years homeschool, we've gotten him to this place academically and socially, so now it's time to start adding those social goals back in, which is really what a part of school is.
So, a lot of different circumstances, a lot of different boxes to check, making sure that you have a good homeschool program, making sure that it's connected to some sort of a community group. Mm-hmm. I know that there are even... Now homeschooling has changed so much that your child can even do plays. I know a friend who has their child in a homeschool program that has a theater program where the kids all meet once a week, and that at one point they got together more often and they rehearsed and did plays that our public school went to and attended. So, it's amazing what you can do now in homeschool.
And not every state has the free homeschooling program, but the states that have the free homeschooling program where it's public schools, you'd still do an IEP, and you can still have the goals, and you'll set it up, and they'll help you and form all these things. And if you're in a bigger city, in a bigger community, like I know here in LA, when my kids used to go to gymnastics, the morning at the gym 2 days a week was just for all the homeschooling families.
Wow. And
so they would come in, and they had a subscription, and they came into the gym, and it was a full-fledged Olympic gymnastics gym, and it was all the homeschooling families, and that was a big social thing, 3 hours twice a week.
Right.
And it was open to anybody that was homeschooled.
But take a look at what's available to you. Take a look at the individual child to see, what's happening with them. Because if they're frustrated at school, or I know people that have pulled their kids out of school because they were being bullied and the school was not taking care of it. And schools, you can get a lawyer and start fighting it. But if your child's self-esteem, as you were saying, is being decimated, sometimes you got to do something really quick, because our kids are the most important thing.
And it's just whatever the concern is at the moment. We've had kids, like the kid I was talking about in our Boston office, academically was the thing, and we've chosen homeschooling not because it's going to be the purpose for his end all, his school career. But at the point is, we thought, well, if we can teach him enough academics, he could go back into school again.
There you go.
And if that's what was needed, and we thought that's what was good for him, and everybody as a team thought that was what was important, then homeschooling for a few years to get him caught up academically isn't a bad idea.
Absolutely. I'm just thinking too that sometimes sensory, it's better for kids to be homeschooled if there's a lot of sensory things. Like I was saying about Jem, if somebody else was stimming, he was gone for the rest of the day. That was it for him. Now, him doing an intensive program with CARD over 1 year fixed that so that he could be around that. But at the time, there was no way that he could have done that. And I do want to say too that a lot of the CARD offices more and more are offering a homeschooling program so that your child can be doing ABA and being homeschooled at the office, so you're getting the best of all possible worlds if there's a CARD office that's close to you. And you can find that out by going to www.centerforautism.com, click on the locations tab and go to your state and look through and see if there's somebody that's within 30 miles, because you need to be able to get there.
Yes.
And be there. So pretty fabulous. I want to move on to the next question here, and then we're going to take a short break as we look at some of the things that you guys are writing in on. So somebody wants to know, is there an easy way to potty train for a child that's on the autism spectrum? We just had played a video with Sienna Greener-Wooten talking a little bit about potty training, breaking it down a little bit. I find that this is one of the most fascinating things, that this is the difference between parents and people who work in the field of behavior with autism. Because as parents, we all, until our child is potty trained, it's this big, fearful, oh no, is my child going to be potty trained? As if there's a great, at least a 50-50 possibility that our kid will never be potty trained. And there's fear, real bone-crushing fear that it won't happen. And then when you talk to behaviorists, ABA people especially, they're like, oh,
yeah,
you missed it. Evelyn just went, oh, yeah. And it's a big fat nothing to you guys, that you're like, oh, no, we've cracked the code on this. We know exactly what to do. We can potty train anybody. It's not even, there's no anxiety. You guys are 100% sure. Why are you so sure?
Well, I think just because we've done it so many times, with so many kids in so many circumstances and so many families, right. So many places, that it does happen. Yeah. There's so many kids that we toilet train, but the one thing that's connected to potty training that people don't think about outside of being a behavior analyst is what you really need from the kid first is compliance, general compliance, meaning the kid 90% of the time will do pretty much anything that you ask them to do for things that they don't really want to be doing.
Right.
And we always say that when we're training supervisors, on this, we say, compliance has to be really set, because the kids have to understand the whole system of rewards. They have to understand that if I listen to you and I follow through on your instruction, that I'm going to get something good for it, but also, good things happen.
Yes.
And so compliance is the key first, outside of potty training. Because if you have a kid who's consistently more non-compliant than compliant, and you try to do potty training, that's usually when things go wrong.
Yeah.
Because they're refusing just for the simple, get me a cup of water.
So now I want to back up for just a second and talk about compliance then, because it really, I know we're going to have people write in, because parents are afraid of their child being completely compliant, because if your child doesn't have a whole lot of language, isn't able to tell you what's like, that they have a pain in their ear, we are generally afraid of our child being compliant because, and somebody's going to write in and say, but doesn't that make them more likely to be victims of abuse or, be abducted, and all the places that our heads are all going to right now.
One of the other, what people don't think about is in autism, generalization is actually a difficulty.
Yeah.
And so initially, compliance to the parents and to the people that you trust is really what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
It's not, we don't want to teach someone to just blindly be compliant to everybody in the world, but also because of the generalization factor that people with autism have, it's actually not a worry.
Yeah.
Because they're not going to listen to that stranger if they've never heard them, if they haven't generalized, those skills. So initially what I'm talking about is they have to be compliant to parents, to people in the household, caregivers, grandparents, just the people in their world. Because you're not going to put your child out in the middle of nowhere with nobody anyway if they can't speak and they can't fend for themselves. You're not going to do that. Someone will always be with them.
Right.
And
I think in actuality, having watched my child and other children go through this, I think it actually, because we set up a circumstance where I ask you to do something, you do it, and you get a significant reward to you. And we start out with very specific things like come here and sit down. Things that are not hard, but they're just not things that the kid wants to do.
Yeah.
There's nothing nefarious at all. Just come here and sit down. That's really what it starts with. Yeah. And so, but the kids learn that if I do that, something good happens. They're not just going to listen to a stranger because there's no guarantee of a reinforcer. And people say, well, if they offer them candy, it just doesn't work that way with our kids. Our kids are very specific. They learn rules. And they, for my kid, he is so quick to say to people, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? I think it helps them to advocate more for themselves because they are interested in what's in it for me. And I'm not going to just do something because you said so.
Yeah, and there's a whole group of parents that would say, like, can you please teach my child to be more compliant?
Right.
But, yeah, so what I'm talking about is this child has to be compliant with those caregivers.
Yeah.
That, they learn that if I say come here, I don't have to ask why and how and when and everything else, but they're going to come because you have something to offer them.
And they know that from repeated times over and over and over. You've set that example.
And so once you get that really general compliance in, then you can work on potty training. You can work on toilet training. Sometimes it's with a schedule. There are other factors that do get in the way sometimes, like the kids that have a lot of gut issues and have diarrhea and there's no control. We usually work with the families first and try to get the biomedical aspect taken care of first, because that is something that their bodies are just doing. And if there's a food that they're eating and they're reacting to it, it's going to be very difficult to potty train. But we'll work with parents on the biomedical aspect. But once we get all of that, and then I do ask the normal, typical questions, like, is he dry through the night? When the kids are dry through the night, it is a sign that there are potty training, that it is an option, that it's coming. If they're having 10 accidents through the night still, then, okay, we have to talk about, if we modify their intake of liquids, what time do we stop giving, how much can they have, and, we do look at all of these outside factors too. But for the most part, toilet training, if you get all those other factors that are more uncontrolled, the compliance, the biomedical issues, some of the liquid intake, you can do potty training. Sometimes it's through schedule, sometimes it's through a potty party where they just need a weekend of repetition to learn, just like the other skills that we do through repetition. Sometimes 2 days it's done and they're on a schedule, and sometimes it's a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, but it's not a big deal. It's consistent because we're putting the same requirements in, showing them this is what the expectation is, this is what the repetition is. This is what's waiting for you in terms of consequences. You get this huge reinforcer if you actually do go pee in the potty. This is a new rule we're establishing.
Yeah. For
the kids that are really rule bound, they think the rule is they're supposed to go in their diaper. They don't know that the real rule is supposed to be in the toilet.
Right. So because it used to be that it was in the diaper.
Yeah, and for 2 or 3 or 5 years, it was that rule. So you're not going to break that rule.
Right.
Very quickly sometimes because they've made this rule and this is what they think is supposed to happen. It might not happen in 2 days or 2 weeks, but in a year it probably can happen. you know? And it's, you know, working with your behavior analyst, your BCBA, to really consistently not expect huge changes, but, you know, small changes at a time. Whatever increment is appropriate for your kid, every kid is different.
Wonderful, wonderful. And we want to say too that when I mentioned that, you know, the code has been cracked, there is a system for potty training that, you know, people change some of the elements of it, but the Fox and Azrin is the method that pretty much everybody does.
Yes.
You can look that up online to go specifically. We've done some videos on it. Skills, you can follow the skills lessons on potty training, and want to tell you that that's skillsforautism.com, and it has tons of lessons on a million other things as well, but all in there. But I love, if you're already working with an ABA team, I would educate yourself and get yourself up on Fox and Azrin and watch the videos so that you know and can expect what's happening. But get your ABA team involved and watch some of the videos. It's all good. I want to say too that Carolyn had written back in and said, what was the website for the homeschooling again? I want to be clear that the website that we gave you, which was centerforautism.com, if you go to the locations tab, it will show you where CARD centers are throughout the United States, and a lot of them are doing homeschooling, that if you're doing an ABA program with them, you can have your child homeschooled at the center. So it's not necessarily a homeschooling website, but if you're doing ABA with CARD, you can have your child homeschooled.
Yeah, usually we ask parents, that the parents are the ones that find the homeschooling program that they want, you know, and our ABA people can help you figure out what is a good one. But, you know, we are more like tutors, you know, and homeschooling is so popular now that there are a lot of other agencies that kind of, you know, people aren't doing homeschooling at home.
Yeah.
They're doing it at a center. And so CARD is functioning in one way. You know, for that academic purposes, they might have a portion of the day that is homeschooled and another portion of the day is funded for medical necessity.
Okay,
So.
Wonderful. All right, we're going to take a short break and then we're going to come back with more of your questions. I'm trying to keep up. You guys are writing in a lot. All right, that's all good. Stick with us.
A lot of adults don't really believe kids. They think, kids are kids. What are they talking about? But when the child stands up for what they believe in, it's so strong and powerful. I first got involved with autism advocacy 4 years ago when my friend was diagnosed. When I found out about my friend's diagnosis, I didn't really understand what it meant. But it didn't matter to me or change our friendship. I didn't look at her any differently. We still had so much fun together. Now I know that she experiences life a little differently than me, and that's okay. Knowing what she goes through has helped me to understand and be more caring towards other people in similar situations. I got involved with ACT Today because I wanted to do whatever I could to help. They provide options like behavioral therapy, medical care, social skills programs, assistance to military families, and much more. Being there for my friend was my #1 priority. I've been volunteering and spreading the word about the cause via my social media platform because raising awareness is a crucial first step. There needs to be more kids and teens involved to make sure that our voices are heard just as loudly as the adults. You may be small like me, but your acts of kindness are not.
We're just saying how cute she is. What a fabulous and what a wonderful advocate
I know.
she has
She's
been
wonderful.
For autism. Okay, I want to go to a couple of questions that were here. GJ has written in and said, what would be the best way to get a child to be compliant without reward system, and how to generalize the compliance from the therapist to the parents to the teachers at school. And I was just saying to Evelyn that, you know, I think a lot of times as parents, what we see as the reinforcers, which is the primary reinforcer, is food. And we get all like, about that. It wasn't my favorite thing. And I would say that we did do a little bit of food reinforcer with Jem, but I was really adamant because obviously I have food issues. I mean, you look at me and you can tell I have food issues, right? And so I did not want to build that in. Plus, which I think we all have a reaction because it looks like dog treats, you know, like when they're training a dog. So we have an emotional reaction to it. So first, maybe let's talk about why food, because it's a primary reinforcer, but you pretty much have to have a reinforcer to really get to good compliance, right?
So one of the factors is people don't like that association, definitely.
Yeah.
Like it feels like a dog treat for doing something. But if your child's diagnosis basically means they're not understanding social interaction. And we would love for our children to only work for our love, our concern, but all of that is so vague. And one thing we call it a primary reinforcer. A primary reinforcer, by definition, is that you don't have to learn to like it.
Yeah.
And food is one of those things. And for Jem, he had other things that he liked. And as long as he had other things to like, you can teach them how to use that. But there are some kids that come in who don't like anything.
To start with.
They will
eventually.
Yeah, eventually we can teach them how to like things when they're, when we teach them how to like secondary reinforcers. So we start pairing tickling with the food. If food is the only thing they like, we do pair other types of more social reinforcement so that they learn to like those other reinforcers, and then we fade the food away so that it becomes more natural and more social. But for some kids, we do have to teach them to like laughing and like tickling and like hugs and like kisses and things like that. And if those kids don't have it initially when we get there and all we are left with food, we just, we work with what you have. Yeah. Every kid that comes in is very, very different. Some kids don't need any food reinforcers. Some people find food aversive. I've had kids who look at a plate and throw up.
Yeah.
Because food is just such a bad feeding, history. And so, you have to take with what you have. At the beginning, when you start an ABA program, your BCBA or your behavior analyst should be asking you to do a reinforcement inventory. What does this child really value? Because if you take their strongest things that they love the most and you start with those, they're going to learn more quickly.
Yeah.
Because they realize this is a good connection. When I do this, I get an M&M or half a Cheerio or whatever it may be. And, but we'll work with the families usually and just say, we have to start with what they already love.
Yeah.
There's no way we're going to tell a child, no, you can't love this, you have to love this other thing. They don't even understand, sometimes what a hug is,
Yeah.
And it might be a sensory issue where they're finding it aversive. But, those are all other factors that really crowd, I think, the whole beginning. If you can see that, you're using primary reinforcement and you're using food at the beginning because this is the only thing your child really loves that we can deliver in small, amounts, then that's where we're going to start with. But your BCBA should also be listening to you and saying, okay, we're going to try to move away from this as quickly as possible too. But if that's the only thing your child loves, we're going to start with that right now.
And then this idea of being able to teach compliance without reinforcers, I got to be honest, as a parent, a couple of years ago, there was that big thing about the tiger mom, and there was also the dad who was just, you will make your bed and you will do this and you will do it because I asked you to do it, right? And there was a big trend among parents, who's going to be a tiger mom, and you make your kid play the piano and you don't get a blanket if you haven't practiced the piano. But they talked to the adult children of the dad who and he turned 18 and he moved out of the house and wanted nothing to do with his parents ever again. And I would say also that what I see as a former teacher is when you try to teach compliance without a reward, they will be compliant as long as they have to be because you're standing there. But the minute you leave, the compliance is out the window. And that's not, for me as a parent, that's not the kind of compliance I want to teach. I want to teach the kind of compliance I didn't understand in the beginning, but I saw that, you fade all the praise and all the other stuff and the behavior stays. Mm-hmm. I mean, we don't reinforce things now. I try to reinforce and remember to reinforce doing homework on a weekly basis, but not on a nightly basis. There's no big reward for doing homework.
But all of us actually all have a reward system. It's just when it's delivered.
Right.
You come to work, you get paid for that paycheck. That's what you're coming for. A kid actually eventually does their homework because they want their parents to be happy with them.
Right.
and that's the reward that comes. So everything is actually reward based on, the whole idea behind behaviorism is that, consequences that we want to repeat are actually rewarded, and, and with positive only reinforcement, we're not going to punish, the behaviors we don't like, but the idea is that they don't get any reward, then the behavior goes away.
Yeah.
And so all of us do something on a reward system on one way or another, but a lot of times it just becomes more abstract, becomes more social. I want I can remind my child to do something, but I don't want to be a nag.
Right, right.
And I know because at a certain point, its reminder is I'm always trying to teach my child who's supposed to be in college age, like this reminder for me is very helpful,
Right.
because then you get your things done and you don't have all these other consequences that happen to you, versus like if you just see me as a nag and you still don't do it, you're going to get all these other consequences anyway.
So I can't think of a single study that I have seen that has shown compliance being easily successful without any kind of reward system.
The whole idea is that we all have a reward system. It's how concrete it is or how abstract it is.
Okay.
It does come sooner or later. It's just what form it does it come.
Okay. And I think that I think that when parents are like, I don't want to do the reward system, it's because they're not clear on how you fade that out over time.
Yeah, and
it does get
the
faded.
pairing system too.
Yes.
It's like showing them that it's not always going to be food, but the food is paired now with tickles and laughters and hugs and all these other things, and words of kindness, And as they understand more communication-wise, those words will mean more. But initially, so many of our kids don't understand language.
Absolutely. Okay, so Nadine says, I have a 5-year-old son who is nonverbal. Is it normal that he is picky with foods? Is it normal that he has a lot of sensory issues around food?
Well, that's the change between the diagnostic manual between autistic disorder and autism spectrum disorder. The one big change was they added the whole sensory component into the ASD.
So it's not uncommon then,
No.
and not uncommon for it to center around food.
No.
But, having said that, do we just go, oh, well, it is what it is?
No, because there are effective ways to teach the kids how to cope with the sensory issues that they're going to be encountering in their daily environment. We only have 5 senses, and taste is one of them, and that's in our mouth.
Right.
And touch is our other one, and that happens in our mouth too.
Texture, yeah.
So 2 out of the 5, so that would make food a big,
well, and
thing.
then smell.
Oh, and smell.
Right.
Yeah, it goes
so now,
3 out of 5 now.
So, yeah.
So it's common that a lot of our kids that come in have these sensory issues, and this is where we'll talk to a lot of families and we get your occupational therapist involved. But a lot of times, occupation, it's such a new field too. ABA is new, but even the whole sensory integration field is very new, and the whole sensory integration field has needed more research. We've seen in our kids there are sensory issues, and we've been able to help our kids desensitize.
Yes.
When our kids are either hyposensitive or hyper. So either they're too affected by a sense or they don't feel something at all.
Yeah.
So many of our kids, families will come in and say, oh no, he has, high pain tolerance. I don't know if it's high pain tolerance or maybe they're just hyposensitive, like they just haven't realized what that means or hasn't processed in their brain what pain means. And they do need a level because that's what will keep them safe.
Yeah.
And so we have kids who come in both ways all the time, and we work with them on whether they need to become more sensitive to one of their senses, or if they're hypersensitive, how to manage and desensitize them, or if they can't desensitize them, how to give them the communication to communicate with their environment and say like, hey, you know what, that smell outside's making me really nauseous, can we close the window?
Right.
Like I watch typical kids who have sensory issues, and the main difference, in a first grade classroom between the kid that has, typical language development versus ours is that typical language development child is able to tell everybody around them and manipulate their environment to get the sensory aspect decreased.
Yeah.
In their environment. They know how to ask for the window to be closed, the shades to be drawn so the light isn't so bright.
Yeah.
They know how to ask for the door to be closed if there's too much noise in the hallway that's bothering them, or if their seat is feeling rocky and they're uncomfortable, how to change chairs.
Right.
So the kid that has all that language development can actually manage all the sensory information in their environment. as opposed to our child who has also the communication issue.
Right.
And they don't know how to communicate, and they don't know how to, you know, make all these changes or questions or requests to make the environment more comfortable for themselves. So they're going to actually try to just avoid.
But we can teach them how to be able to communicate. Even if they're nonverbal, we can teach them how to be able to communicate their needs.
Definitely.
And to advocate for themselves. And we can and use desensitization a lot with food to be able to, there's a wonderful, in the A word that we show here on the show, and we're about to show a clip from the A word, they desensitize over a period of time Jack Riley to a series of different foods. I mean, there's a point when they show him a banana in the beginning and he bursts into tears because he doesn't want to be anywhere near it. And then by the end, he's able to eat a banana all by himself. So, you know.
No, we have a kid who we would, when he came in at 4, we'd show him a plate and he would vomit.
Yeah.
Because it was so aversive food. But by the time he was 9, and we did intensive feeding, and Dad was actually a chef.
Yeah.
And by 9 was the first time he actually asked for food. The parents were ready to cry.
Of course.
Because they had never thought their child would ever like food.
You can get there. You absolutely can get there. And there are lots of different things. You know, it really is a wonderful thing if you're working with an ABA provider who has a food and eating specialist, because there are lots of different techniques that we have now. But it really, you know, it's fascinating to me because they segment it into, okay, is it that the child is picky about certain colors of foods or certain textures or temperatures? You know, they segment it, and then there's different interventions that they can do for each one of those things.
And I actually ask the parents right away. I just say I'll just say, when your child eats, does he actually chew? And so many of the kids that come in that have feeding issues don't chew.
Yeah.
So how do you actually eat if you don't chew?
Right.
You know, you become really selective.
Well,
and so
or you choke, and that gets scary.
Yeah, and the thing is, a lot of times kids will also come in and only eat with one side of their mouth and not the other. And I'm always telling families, no, they need to chew, exercise those muscles so that they can learn to talk with them.
Exactly. It's the same set of muscles.
Yeah, and so that sensory aspect is, we want to go through and see, like, what is it a sensory issue that's preventing the feeding issue? Because if it's sensory, it actually is very easy, it's much easier to manage when it's a sensory issue. You know, sometimes it's motor, and that's a lot more difficulty. Like, how do you teach somebody actually how to chew? And you're working, you know, with a lot of, you know, speech therapists and motor people, you know, because a lot of other times they have other motor issues if they can't chew either.
Yeah.
And so it all goes together, and you want our kids to be desensitized food so that they can eat and grow and be healthy. But also, to get that, they need to use those muscles so that they can talk.
Absolutely. Those are those oral motor muscles. We need them. We're out of time. I hate it, but we're out of time. And we don't have time to get to more of the questions, although if we have time in the next, I'll address just a couple of things that people have written in. But I do want to say to you, check out the breadth of videos that we have on some of these subjects. One of the things that we haven't been talking to you guys too much about is that there is a catalog of the answers that Dr. Grampiche has given through Ask Dr. Doreen. If you just Google Ask Dr. Doreen, you'll come to a website that has every single question over the last 6 years cataloged by topic. So you can look up feeding, and then under feeding, it will show you all of the questions. And if you click on the question, it takes you directly. You don't have to slog through hours of things anymore. It'll take you, so you can look up food selectivity, a question like that, and click on it, and you can hear Dr. Grampiche's answer on that. We're trying to bring much more of that to you on our new website that's coming. But we're out of time now, so we want to thank you so much for joining us and being with us.